What's going on, gang? Welcome back to the channel. My name's CJ. This is Out of Bounds DFS, and in today's video, we're going to do a first look at the PrizePicks NBA board for February 28th. It's the last day of the month of February. It's a little after 1 p.m. here, almost 2 p.m. here on the East Coast. So just keep in mind that the projections you see in today's video are subject to change and normally do throughout the day. So pretty big game, slate of games rather, for today's schedule. On a Sunday, normally it's pretty much a pretty light schedule, at least on the weekends typically. But yeah, we got quite a few games here, so a lot to discuss. If this is your first time to the channel, welcome to Out of Bounds DFS. On this channel, we talk all things single player, daily fantasy sports, mainly prize picks, a little bit of monkey knife fight when I find the time, and we'll talk about some of the other sites as they are on the way up as well. So if this is your first time here, hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications, and if you're returning to the channel and this is your second or third or 100th time here, well, thank you. I appreciate the support. Just make sure that you're subscribed and that you're not missing any of my videos. So without further ado, we'll start getting into some of the injury news today. And at the top of the board here, we've got Jrue Holiday, Milwaukee Bucks point guard, is probable to play. He'll be returning to the Bucks lineup. Anthony Davis, forward for the Lakers, is out indefinitely for the Lakers with a calf injury. Cody Zeller, Charlotte Hornets, questionable with a hip. Trae Young, point guard, Atlanta Hawks, questionable with an adductor. Jaylen Brown, Boston Celtics, questionable with a knee. Victor Oladipo, Houston Rockets, out due to rest. Elfrid Payton, Knicks, doubtful with a hamstring. DeLon Wright, Detroit Pistons, out indefinitely with a groin injury. Malik Beasley, Minnesota Timberwolves, is suspended, so he's out. Devontae Graham, Charlotte Hornets, out with a knee. Tyrese Halliburton, Sacramento Kings, is out with a calf injury. Cam Reddish, Atlanta Hawks, doubtful. Tyler Herro, Miami Heat, questionable. Grayson Allen, Memphis Grizzlies, out. And that's going to wrap it up for the injury news. No need to go any further than that. You see who's there. You see what's going on. So without further ado, let's close the injury window out and start breaking down these games. Now, we do have a game at 3:30 here on the East Coast. Actually, 3:40 on PrizePicks times. You know how they do. Usually about 10 minutes later than the real starting time. So we're not going to talk about that game because by the time this video is edited and posted to YouTube, it will be probably past 3:30, 3:40, and yeah, that doesn't really help anybody out. So we'll start with the next game on the board, which is the Washington Wizards taking on the Boston Celtics. Now, this game tips off at 7:10 p.m. So got a lot of interesting names here. Bradley Beal, Jayson Tatum, Russell Westbrook, Jaylen Brown, Hachimura, Kemba Walker, so on and so forth. So let's do what we've been doing in the last couple of videos here by heading to Roto Grinders, where I already have the FanDuel projections preloaded. Of course, we use FanDuel projections because they're exactly like PrizePicks for NBA DFS over there. So we'll start there, and then we go to this column here, this DVA. So that's defense versus archetype. So what Roto Grinders has done, and I love, they've taken the DVP, defense versus position, and they've basically amplified it, or they've broken it out. So you don't have just a generic position like point guard. You have a distributor point guard. You have a combo guard. You have different types of point guards. So this makes a lot of sense because, you know, the game has evolved. Point guards aren't just point guards. Not all point guards are the same in terms of the way that they score fantasy points for us. So loving this DVA feature. So we'll start with that, and we will sort by the highest DVA first. And we'll start working our way down the line. Now, the first guy that jumps out at me is Kemba Walker. Now, I almost mentioned him a couple days ago when they played because he was in a plus DVA situation going against, who'd they play? Was it Washington? No, it was Indiana. It was Indiana, and he ended up having a really good game. So I'm not going to skip over Kemba Walker today. I'm going to talk about him. He's projected at 33 on PrizePicks, 35 on Roto Grinders, and he's in a very plus DVA matchup here. Before we break down Kemba Walker, though, let's talk about the game totals and spread. So Boston, 119.5, 6.5 point favorites at home against Washington, who's projected for 113. So yes, I love these totals of this game. I am a little hesitant, however, about the spread. 6.5 points, well, that's not green. In fact, that's like barely yellow to me. I put this more toward the orange in terms of blowout risk. Washington has been playing much better basketball, and Boston really hasn't been playing great basketball, so maybe this game ends up being a lot closer and stays competitive for longer than the spread would indicate. I think that's a real possibility. So I put this kind of in a yellow to orange for me in terms of blowout risk. So let's get into Kemba Walker's recent games real quick. You could see in his last 5, he's got some very good standout games, and then he's got some that are terrible. And that's been the case with a lot of these Boston Celtics lately. Jaylen Brown, Jayson Tatum come to mind. So we go back here 5 games ago, 21.2, 52, huge game here, 28.2, 30.3, and 46.6. So you could see in his last 5 games, he's managed to go over 33 in just 2 out of 5. Not a very good success rate. Looking back here, he does have a game log against this Washington Wizards team from back on Valentine's Day, February 14th. Against Washington, he ended up with 37.4 fantasy points in that one, which would be plenty to put him over this 33. So I'm liking the over here so far in Kemba Walker. Now, I mentioned Washington, very generous against combo guards, allowing 54.55 fantasy points per game. So that's much, much higher than his projection of 33 over on PrizePicks. I think there's a high ceiling here for Kemba Walker. There's major potential for him to play very well here and soar over this 33 fantasy point mark. So I'm liking the over so far. Almost 30 minutes a game for him, over 1 fantasy point per game, and his usage rating 28.24. So very good numbers there for Kemba. Moving along here, let's see who else may stand out. We got Russell Westbrook up on PrizePicks for 46. They've got him at 46.12, so they both sites pretty much agree on his projection of 46, but he is in a little bit of a plus DVA matchup here, as Boston has been very generous to combo guards. If you think back to the likes of like Trae Young in recent days, who absolutely torched this Boston Celtics team. Of course, he does it a little differently than Westbrook. Westbrook tends to rack up a bunch of different stats. Trae Young, more of a scorer, shooter. So a little bit of upside here for Westbrook. I don't mind that play. Moving down the line here, we got Jayson Tatum. He's projected at 45 on PrizePicks, 43 over on Roto Grinders. The DVA doesn't look too enticing, too juicy for him, 34.77. So probably not looking to go to a over on Jayson Tatum. In fact, I'd say he's a candidate for an under, especially with the way he's been playing. The guy has been struggling lately, struggling. Here's a guy worth talking about and digging a little deeper on. Rui Hachimura has been playing pretty decent basketball lately. He's projected at 26 over on PrizePicks, 24.5 over on Roto Grinders. So they like the under, but you can see that this is a plus DVA situation for him. So let's dig into his game logs real quick and see what's cooking for Rui. I think he's part Japanese, so maybe he's channeling his inner Gilbert Arenas, Hibachi, if anybody's familiar with that nickname for Gilbert Arenas, former Washington Wizard. Anyway, 5 games back here, 33.4, he went over that 26, 24.2, fell short, 21.8, he fell short. 28, he popped back up. That would be an over, and then 15.2 would be well under. So it's been a mixed bag here for Rui, but most nights you can see he kind of floats between 20, 25 fantasy points. Some games going even higher than that, 25 to 30 range. So just 2 overs in his last 5 and 3 unders. So if we look back at his matchup on Valentine's Day, where he played 22 minutes, light minute game for him, he ended that game with 23.3 fantasy points. So yeah, it's a little discouraging to see. So maybe Rui Hachimura has some risk here. But what I like about this is that he's projected to play 34 minutes. Now, he's a versatile forward. As I mentioned, this is a plus DVA matchup for him. Boston allowing over 31 fantasy points per game to versatile forwards. Some things that's working against Hachimura, though, this is a back-to-back 3 games and 4 night situation for him. And his fantasy points per minute are just 0.79, falling way short of that 1 or more fantasy point number that we look for. And his usage rating's not very good either, 17.9. So there you have it for Hachimura plus DVA matchup, but otherwise some things that are definitely knocks against him. Otherwise, nobody's really standing out here. Jaylen Brown's all the way down here. He's not in a very plus matchup. He might be a good guy to take an under on, as he's projected for 40 over on PrizePicks. So let's move along to the next game and see if we can identify some other good opportunities here on PrizePicks today. We've got the New York Knicks versus the Detroit Pistons next up on the PrizePicks board. That game tips off at 8:10 p.m. And we'll head over to Roto Grinders and take a look at the game totals and spread. Game totals looking a bit light here. We got Detroit at 106, New York at 105. The spread, however, is a strong green for me. It's only a 1-point spread, so the game should stay close and competitive. All of the major names in this game should play big minutes. So guys like Julius Randle, Jeremy Grant, your RJ Barretts, your Mason Plumlees. Derrick Rose was a guy who absolutely shined the other night. Love some D Rose. So let's start looking into the DVAs here and see if anybody stands out. And what do you know? Derrick Rose popping off the board right here. So let's talk Derrick Rose real quick. He's projected 30 on PrizePicks. He's at 31.5 over on Roto Grinder. So just off the bat there, you can see that this is a plus matchup for Derrick Rose, where an over might be in play. Now, if we go back to 5 games ago, he only played 23 minutes, ended up with 13 points, 18 minutes, 10 points. But then you see 3 games in a row where he's been on a bit of a tear here. So 37.8, very good. 27.6, not so great. But he started his last game against Indiana, played over 37 minutes, and showed that he still has it. 42.7 fantasy points. So if he's in another situation where he's going to be getting major minutes like he did against Indiana, well, the over, I think, makes a ton of sense. Looking back here against Detroit, no previous games. And you want to know why? Because he used to be a Detroit Piston. He is very new to the New York Knicks. So maybe we play the revenge narrative with Derrick Rose. Yes, for all you narrative folks out there, this is Derrick Rose versus the team that wasn't playing him, wasn't giving him a chance, who traded him away. Do you think he's going to have a big old boulder on his shoulder tonight? Forget a chip. I think he's going to have a boulder on his shoulder. So he's expected to play 30 minutes tonight. He is considered to be a combo guard. Now, working in his favor is the fact that this Pistons team allows 49.16 fantasy points per game to combo guards like Derrick Rose. That's almost 20 fantasy points higher than his 30-point projection on PrizePicks. So loving the situation here for Rose. Now this is a back-to-back 3 games and 4 nights for him, but he's really only started to play major minutes in his last couple of games. I think he should be pretty fresh here. 1.1 fantasy points per minute and 28.25 usage rating. So although he may not be the MVP caliber Derrick Rose that we all came to know and love in his days with the Chicago Bulls, he's still getting it done here, putting up pretty impressive fantasy point and usage numbers. So loving the over on Derrick Rose. Looking down the line here, Julius Randle looks like he's in a pretty good matchup here. He's projected for just 40.5 on on Roto Grinders, which put him about 3.5 points under his projection on PrizePicks. So if you believe that the front court of Mason Plumlee and Jeremy Grant pose a threat to Julius Randle, well then maybe take the under on him, as the DVA isn't too good for him. So we'll keep working down the line here. Not seeing anything that's really standing out. Mason Plumlee projected for 30.5. He's at 34 over on PrizePicks. That might be a situation that you want to take the under on. He'll be facing off against Julius Randle and Nerlens Noel. There's Jeremy Grant, projected for 38 on PrizePicks, 38.88 on Roto Grinders. So it doesn't really look like there's much of an edge or anything super interesting that stands out here. We could talk RJ Barrett real quick. RJ Barrett's projected at 28 over on PrizePicks, just 21.72 over on Roto Grinders. So that's a huge gap, right? Why is he so low? Well, let's look at his recent game logs and see what RJ's been up to. Everybody, get your mother load on. Everybody get your load on. I don't know what's taking so long. There we go. Thank heavens. All right, so we go back 5 games here. 27.9 puts him under tonight's projection. 31.3 puts him under. 14, 19, under, and then a 33.4. So in his last 5 games, he has went over this 28 twice and went under 3 times. So not a very good success rate there. Hasn't been playing fantastic basketball. He's been a guy who's been difficult to trust in most games. He's going to play 27 minutes tonight. He is a scoring wing. This is probably a situation where I'm taking the under on RJ Barrett based on the projections, based on this DVA of just 23. That puts him a few points under his projection of 28 over on PrizePicks. So we don't just talk about the overs here. We talk about situations where there might be good unders, and this could be one of those situations. But enough of that game there. I think we've dove in enough talking about the crappy Pistons and Knicks. Sorry if there's any Pistons and Knicks fans. Look, I'm a Magic fan. We're pretty crappy too, so we're on the same boat together. Let's talk the next game. We got the Atlanta Hawks versus the Miami Heat. Now, on paper, this looks like a pretty exciting game here. Let's enable both of those teams, and we'll start with the totals and spread. We got Miami at 113.25, Atlanta at 108.25. So you're talking about just a 5-point spread. Game looks like it's going to stay pretty competitive. Probably going to give this one a yellow in terms of game spread. Can't give it a green. There's some chance there that if Trae Young sits, for example, that Miami just absolutely steamrolls this Atlanta Hawks team. But if Trae Young's in, the game should stay much closer, much more competitive. So I'm liking the way things are shaping up here. All right, moving down the line here. Let's take a look and see if there's any DVA situations that really jump off the board. For Atlanta, we've got Trae Young, Clint Capella, John Collins. For Miami, we've got Bam Adebayo, Jimmy Butler, and we've got Goran Dragic. So let's see here. Arrow, not on the board, none, no. Trae Young, now if he plays, is in a good situation here. That DVA stands out to me. Let's look at Trae real quick. He's projected at 44 on PrizePicks today. If we go through his game logs, you can see that he's been pretty hot for the most part. 55, 64, 52, 47, and 33. So in his last 5 games, he's went over today's projection of 44, 4 out of 5 times. So very good success rate. Going back in time here, I don't see any game logs of him versus this Miami team. His minutes, 36. The DVA pops off at 52. Miami allowing 52 fantasy points per game to combo guards. So in this situation, that puts him a few points higher in terms of what they're allowing versus where he's projected at 44 on PrizePicks. So I'm loving the upside here for Trae Young. Playing almost 35 minutes per game, 1.29 fantasy points per minute, and a usage rating of 34.42. Fantastic numbers for him. Moving down the line here, anybody else standing out? Clint Capella, he's in a negative DVA spot here. Miami doing a pretty good job against post-up bigs, allowing just 26.42 fantasy points per game. He's projected at 39 on both sites, both on PrizePicks and on Roto Grinders. So not really seeing an edge for Clint Capella. I'm probably fading that situation or taking the under in this case. Probably not interested in any Bam Adebayo either here in terms of taking the over. He's projected at 44 on PrizePicks. He's at 42.38 over on Roto Grinders, and the DVA is not looking very advantageous for Bam. 23.84 fantasy points per game allowed by this Hawks front court to versatile bigs. So that might be a situation where you take the under on Bam Adebayo. Going down here, Jimmy Butler, also not in a plus DVA situation, but Jimmy Butler, a pretty darn good basketball player, so he's the kind of guy who can probably overcome certain matchups. Projected at 44 on PrizePicks, 48 over on Roto Grinders, so they like him to go over. Let's dig in a little bit deeper on Jimmy Butler and just see if this makes any sense taking the over here. In his last 5 games, he's got 44, 42, 38, 61, and 57. So in his last 5, he's went over 44, 1, 2, 3 out of 5, 3 overs, 2 unders. No previous game logs versus this Hawks team. So he's expected to play about 35 minutes tonight. Is a scoring wing. Now, the Hawks have allowed just 23.77 fantasy points per game to scoring wings, so not a standout number here. I can't call it a plus matchup, but again, this is the kind of guy who is matchup proof, so he could defy the odds, I guess you could say, that the rankings that are working against him here. 2 games and 3 nights for him, over 33 minutes per game this season, 1.38 fantasy points per minute, and a usage rating of over 27. Fantastic numbers there for Jimmy Butler. So moving on, John Collins, not really interested in him. He hasn't been playing very good basketball. Goran Dragic, pass first point guard. They call him a distributor over on Roto Grinders. They got him at 26.5 today. He was like 21 the other night. 21 was a fantastic number. This 26.5, though, not a situation where I'd probably be targeting the over. Most likely taking the under on Goran Dragic with that one. So I think that's going to do it for this game. Overall, though, pretty good totals here. And the fact that the spread is like within 5 points, I think you can feel pretty okay taking guys from this game, as long as Trae Young plays. If he doesn't play, then I don't think the Hawks stand much of a chance and can't really put up much of a fight here against the Heat. So next game on the board, we've got the Memphis Grizzlies versus the Houston Rockets. For the Grizzlies, we've got Ja Morant, Jonas Valanciunas, Dylan Brooks. For the Rockets, we've got John Wall, Eric Gordon, Jayson Tatum. I mentioned at the top of the show, no Victor Oladipo. He's expected to miss tonight's game. So let's head over to Roto Grinders and find this game and take a look at the game totals and spread first, and then we'll get into hopefully some good matchups here. Now, Houston, 109.5 at home. They're a pretty decent-sized underdog versus this Memphis team. You're looking at about a 4 or 5 point spread. So no, I wouldn't call this yellow. I'd probably just say it's green. These teams, match up pretty well. Memphis hasn't been playing fantastic basketball lately, so I think this game could stay close and competitive for the most part. So let's start getting into some of the individual players here and see if there's any DVA situations that really stand out. Now, first one that really catches my eye is going to be Ja Morant, who's projected at 38 today. They've got him at 36.27 over on Roto Grinders, but this DVA situation is a very good one. This Houston Rockets team typically not very strong against guards. Defensively, they don't scare me at all. I mean, I've been playing players against this Houston Rockets team, guys like, Kobe White, and they've done really well. So let's take a look at Ja Morant, though, and see how he's been playing in his last few games. So if we go back to the 5th game here, 39.6, that put him over 38. 25.5, not very good. 45.3 over, 28.9 under, and a 36.3 would also put him under, although pretty decent. So all in all, it's kind of been hard to trust Ja lately. He's in terms of taking the over, he's went over just twice, under in 3. So shaky situation here, but tonight he's going to be playing 33 minutes. He is a combo guard. The Houston Rockets, as I mentioned, allowing over 54 fantasy points per game to combo guards like Ja, which puts him almost like 20 about 20 more fantasy points they allow on average than his projection tonight, so around 18. So this is a plus DVA situation for Ja Morant, one that I would like to target. 3 games and 4 nights for him. He's playing 30.5 minutes, 1.15 fantasy points per minute, and a usage rating of 30. So good numbers there. Liking what I'm seeing for Ja Morant. I know Roto Grinders has him under, but I do think there's a pretty high ceiling, and the totals look good on the Memphis side especially. I think he could get there as long as he shows up and plays like he's capable of playing. The next guy we'll talk about, let's talk John Wall real quick. He's projected at 42.5 over on PrizePicks, 43.34 on Roto Grinders. He is a combo guard. Of course, we mentioned no Victor Oladipo, so that leaves the likes of Eric Gordon, Jayson Tatum to hopefully help John Wall stay in this game. The Rockets have just been getting blown out. Haven't really been a competitive team this season. So let's look at his game logs real quick. as we wait for the wheel to turn. All right, so we go back to his 5th game, huge game here, and that was against his former team, the Washington Wizards, 50 points. Then he had a 44, so that's 2 games where he would have been a strong overplay. Then he's got 2 games where he would have went well under this 42.5. Now, he came up just short against the Toronto Raptors from hitting the over there, 42.4. So he's got 3 unders in his last 3 games, so 3 in a row where he's went under 42.5. And then going back 2 games, he has 2 games where he's went over. So against this Memphis team, he does have 1 previous game log. If we go all the way back to February 4th, he played just under 28 minutes and ended up finishing with 28.2 fantasy points. So that was a little bit over 1 fantasy point per minute. Not a fantastic game for him, but could have been a situation where other guys like Oladipo or maybe Cousins, some of these other names were healthy and in the lineup. So that could have cut into John Wall's production potentially. So looking at his minutes tonight, he's expected to play about 33. He is a combo guard. Now, the DVA situation looks good despite this ranking of 28th, which would indicate that Memphis is the 28th most stingiest or least giving team to combo guards. The average is good here at 42.69. I would say that it's a slightly plus matchup for John Wall, but the fact that he's at 42.5 is so limited in terms of the other pieces around him. I mean, he's going to have the green light to do whatever he wants with the basketball. Shoot it 20 times, 25 times. I mean, you name it. He's going to be in full control here. 2 games and 3 nights for him, over 31 minutes per game, 1.15 fantasy points per minute, and a usage rating of over 31. Those numbers are sure to rise, as I mentioned before. There's just not any help for him in this situation. So moving down the list here, let's see if anybody else jumps off here. Jonas Valanciunas, maybe that's a good situation. The Hawks are pretty limited in terms of any big men, so this could be a situation where Jonas Valanciunas tears them apart here. I see this game being more guard-friendly, though, a lot of guard play, but Valanciunas might be able to gobble up some rebounds and stuff. Let's just take a look real quick and see what he's done in his last game against Houston. I thought we had a game log here. Oh, we do, but he missed the game on February 4th. So, no game log for Jonas Valanciunas, but just going off the top of my dome here, I think this is a good situation for him. Eric Gordon projected at 31. He's at 30 on Roto Grinders. Not a plus DVA situation for him. Not really loving that. Dylan Brooks, 26 on PrizePicks, 25.9. Nothing really standing out there. Jayson Tatum, shooting wing. He's at 26 on PrizePicks, 27.49. So I would say a lot of these other guys don't really interest me in terms of overplays, but might make for good under candidates. So just to recap, pretty good totals on both sides here. The spread should stay somewhat competitive, although Houston has been getting blown out, so there's always blowout risk. And if you're afraid of the blowout, well, definitely just play them in first half formats. I should definitely mention that. So let's move on to the next game. We got the Golden State Warriors taking on the Los Angeles Lakers, and this one's super interesting because of the star power. We've got Steph Curry versus LeBron James. Does that ever get old? I don't think so. I mean, I like seeing these two go at it. So let's head back to Roto Grinders, turn on the games here for Golden State Warriors and Los Angeles Lakers. And here you can see the Lakers are at 112.25, making them 3-point favorites against the Golden State Warriors, who are projected at 109.25. So the totals, they're not elite, they're just good. And the spread here is about a 3-point spread. So overall, this game looks like it's going to stay close, competitive. Let's take a look at the DVAs here and see if anything jumps out at us. We got Dennis Schruter, who is looking like he's in a great matchup here. Now, PrizePicks has him at 28. Roto Grinders has him at 25.66. But the DVA for him is looking really good, as Golden State allows almost 52 fantasy points per game to combo guards. Now, I took the over on Dennis Schruter the other night at this same projection of 28, where he was in a plus DVA situation. So let's look at his game logs real quick, see if that maybe makes some sense, taking the over. Maybe we go against Roto Grinders and say, hey, Roto Grinders, you don't know what you're talking about. We do. But in his last 5 games here, 35.9 against OKC, his former team. He played pretty well, actually, in 2 games against them. Then he drops down to 6.1 against Memphis, playing just 21 minutes. 13.2, playing just 27 minutes. Then we got pretty good games here in back-to-back. 42.7, he misses 4 games in a row and then comes back in that last game against Portland, drops 29.6. So this is another situation for Schruter where I think that he can potentially defy this number, this projection on RotoGrinders of 25.66 and go over here. So he's expected to play 30 minutes tonight. He is a combo guard. Again, Golden State allowing 52 fantasy points per game to combo guards, which puts them, way over in terms of his projection tonight versus the amount of fantasy points per game they're allowing. 2 games and 3 nights for Schruter, over 31 minutes per game, 0.84 fantasy points per minute. Not strong there, but, with some of these guys like Anthony Davis out of the lineup, I think that this number will probably continue to trend upwards for Schruter. 21.82 is his usage rating. So let's keep moving down the line here. Oh, boy. We got to talk Steph Curry. Now, he's projected at 51 on PrizePicks, just 44 over on RotoGrinders. So not too often you see that these two sites are so far different on their projections. But for whatever reason, RotoGrinders likes Curry to go well under 51 fantasy points. It doesn't look like it's going to be a blowout. The totals look decent, not great, but pretty good. So why do they like Curry so far under? Well, let's take a look at his game logs. Maybe that will tell the story. Come on, baby, come on. All right, we're back. And if we go back to his 5th game here, 52.9 puts him over. 52.9 puts him over. He misses this game against Charlotte. 57.2 would put him over. And he's got 2 games where he falls short of 51, 47.6 and 46.3. So in total, his last 5 games, he's went over 3 out of 5. Pretty good success rate there. Now, if we jump to his minutes, he's expected to play about 35. This is a plus DVA situation for Curry based on RotoGrinders projection of 44.02. The average points allowed to combo guards by this Lakers team is higher than this 44.02, but lower than the projection over on PrizePicks of 51. So not a plus matchup for Steph Curry here in terms of his PrizePicks projection versus what they're allowing. This is a 2 games and 3 night situation for him, playing over 34 minutes per game, 1.36 fantasy points per minute with a usage rating of 32.9. So fantastic numbers for Steph. Now, moving on here, who else do we have on the Lakers side? We got Kyle Kuzma. Now, Kuzma is an interesting play. He is projected at 24 over on PrizePicks, 22.79 over on RotoGrinders. So RotoGrinders likes the under by just a bit for Kyle Kuzma, but this is a plus DVA situation, which is something I'm going to keep hammering on. These DVA numbers are really a good way to try and get an edge here. Now, if we go back to Brooklyn 5 games ago, 29.8 would put him over, 27.8 would put him over, 32.2 would put him over, 21.9, and then an 18.2, 2 back-to-back games where he had under 24 fantasy points. So 3 overs, 2 unders. Let's take a look at his recent games here, or let's take a look at his minutes, I should say. 26 minutes. He is a versatile forward. As I mentioned, this Golden State Warriors team allowing over 37, almost 38 fantasy points per game to versatile forwards, which puts him in a very plus situation. That's 13 points higher than his PrizePicks projection. 2 games and 3 nights for him. He's playing almost 26 minutes per night, 0.86 fantasy points per minute, and a usage rating of 18.83. So not fantastic fantasy point per minute numbers or usage rating numbers, falling quite a bit short, I would say, from some of the standards that we expect. So I do like this situation for Kyle Kuzma. I think this is a game where he can potentially bounce back and break that 2-game streak of going under tonight's projection to 24. So I like the over on Kuzma. LeBron projected at 52 on PrizePicks, 51.1 over on RotoGrinders, and then they've got a DVA of 37.74, but some guys just defy numbers. I mean, this is a dude that I would feel very uneasy about taking the under on despite the fact that Roto Grinders thinks he's going to go under and that he is not in a plus DVA situation. And you can see in his last 5 games, 49, 44, 56, 28, and 70. A 70 burger. Whew. So, yeah, I don't feel super confident about recommending you take the under on LeBron James. If you don't want to play with fire, I totally get that. You can just fade him. You can just walk away and not play King James. It's okay. You don't have to do it. Moving down the list here, anybody else jumping off? No Montrezl Harrell tonight. They went Kyle Kuzma instead of Harrell. Kelly Oubre, he's projected at 34, which would be higher than this 31.8. But the Lakers allowing 31.39 fantasy points per game to scoring wings like Oubre, so this could be a good situation for him. Draymond Green projected at 36 on PrizePicks. Here's a 31.09, and the Lakers are just allowing just 30.35 fantasy points per game to versatile bigs like Green. So the under looking like a good play on Draymond Green. And I think that's going to do it for this game. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one. We have touched on every big name that you could think of there. So moving on, we got the next game here, the Phoenix Suns versus the Minnesota Timberwolves. We got the likes of Devin Booker, Karl Anthony Towns, DeAndre Ayton, Anthony Edwards, Chris Paul, and Ricky Rubio, a guy that we haven't seen a whole lot of this season. So let's go ahead and find this game here and look at the game totals and spread first. So this one is definitely a troubling one in terms of the spread. So Minnesota 107.75, Phoenix 117.75, 10-point spread, guys. Just going to give it to you raw, real, and uncut. This is a game that has tremendous blowout potential. So be very careful about rostering anybody in a full game format. Does not look like it's going to stay close. Does not seem to be one that stays competitive. So with that in mind, let's start looking at some of these numbers here. DVAs that stand out to me, well, Karl Anthony Towns projected for 49.5 on Roto Grinders, 47.5 on PrizePicks. So Roto Grinders likes the over here. Now he'll be facing DeAndre Ayton. Ayton and company, Phoenix Suns allowing just 28.63 fantasy points per game to versatile bigs. So wouldn't call this a plus situation, a plus matchup for him. The under looking like probably the way to go, in my opinion, especially when you consider that there's a 10-point spread and that a blowout is a real possibility. So full game for me, probably an under on Karl Anthony Towns. Let's see here. DeAndre Ayton's at 36 on PrizePicks, 34 on Roto Grinders. Not loving that. Devin Booker, he's projected at 38 on PrizePicks, 39.26 on Roto Grinders. So they like the over on him. Not a plus DVA situation for him either. And really, I mean, some of these pass first point guards like Ricky Rubio, Chris Paul, you can see the DVAs aren't very favorable. They like the under on Rubio and they like the under slightly on Chris Paul. So, not a really sexy or exciting game in terms of targeting anybody in a full game format. So, yeah, I think I'm going to wrap that one up. We could just move on to the next game. We got the Charlotte Hornets taking on the Sacramento Kings here. And we got the likes of Lamelo Ball, De'Aaron Fox, Terry Rozier, Buddy Hield, Gordon Hayward, and Rashaan Holmes. Oh, Malik Monk, Marvin Bagley, Miles Bridges, Harrison Barnes. Boy, they threw all the scrubs at us tonight in this game here. So let's take a look at this last game. Huge totals here and fantastic spread. So there could be plenty of ways to go here in terms of fantasy goodness. This one projects to have lots and lots of fantasy upside, single stat upside in terms of points, assists, rebounds. So anytime the totals are high, everything else also should expect to be higher. So loving the way this one's shaping up so far. It exceeds over 230 combined points quite easily, and the spread is super competitive here, less than a 1-point spread. So loving the way things are shaping up. Let's take a look at the DVAs here. And right off the top here, I know we talked Malik Monk. He's a guy that we haven't mentioned a whole lot on the channel. He's at 21 fantasy points on PrizePicks. They've got him at about 21 over on RotoGrinders, but there is definitely some potential here, an upside play here for Malik Monk, as this Sacramento Kings team has allowed over 54 fantasy points per game, which is like more than double his projection of 21 tonight. So liking the way this is shaping up. Let's just dig in on Malik Monk since we don't know a lot about him recently. We got to try and figure out if he's been playing good basketball, bad basketball, you name it. So in his fifth game back here, 28.8 puts him well over 21. He does fall short here, played just 22 minutes, 17 fantasy points. Played 23 minutes in the next game, ended up with 27.2, so that would put him over. 38.9 here and 28.5. So guys, this might be a little hidden gem here. Malik Monk going over in 4 out of his last 5 games. Just one game where he's went under tonight's projection of 21 fantasy points. Now looking back, I don't see any game logs of him versus this Kings team, so we can jump ahead here, talk his minutes. He's going to have to play some minutes in order to produce some fantasy points for us. And tonight, they like him to play about 26. Now, I mentioned combo guards against this Kings team are eating this season. So I'm loving the way this one's setting up for Malik Monk, pending he gets enough minutes. 2 games and 3 nights for him. Has only played about 22 minutes per game for the season. So they expect him to play about 4 more minutes than his season average. So that would be nice. 0.85 fantasy points per minute, not fantastic. Falls short of that gold standard of 1 or more fantasy points. And then his usage rating is over 22, so that's not bad. Handles the ball quite a bit when he is in the game. So liking the way this one's shaping up here. Now another guy who falls into that combo guard category for the Charlotte Hornets, rather, is Terry Rozier. He's projected at 35 on PrizePicks, 33.94, putting him 1 point under. But this is another guy to keep an eye out on, as his DVA situation is in the same one. He's in that same group as Malik Monk. So he's playing a lot more minutes than Monk at 35. 0.98 fantasy points per minute, and his usage rating is at 22.87. So he's kind of an interesting guy too, in a very good situation. Next guy we're going to talk about is De'Aaron Fox, and boy, they have jacked his projections up today. He's been a guy who's been floating around 40 for most nights here recently. Well, today he's at 45, which is much, much higher, and there's probably a good reason for that. So let's take a look at his RotoGrinders projection. He's at 42.99, fair enough for us to just round it up to 43, which puts him still 2 points under his projection versus PrizePicks. Now, let's dig into his game logs and see what Fox has been up to in his last couple of games here. You could see that if we go back 5 games, even 6, 7 games, he was on this streak here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games in a row where he wasn't coming close to hitting the over on 40 fantasy points where he had been projected in the last few days. Well, turning things around here in his last 2 games, and you know, how could you not against soft matchups versus the Knicks, soft matchups versus the Detroit Pistons? He puts up 47 and 49. So out of his last 5 games, he's went under 3 times, over 2 times on tonight's projection of 45 fantasy points. So this one's looking pretty good here so far. Now, we mentioned no previous game logs of Kings Hornets, so we can move ahead here and look at his minutes. Today, he's expected to play about 36 minutes. Combo guards against this Charlotte Hornets backcourt. Charlotte allowing 48.42 fantasy points per game. So we compare that 48.42 to his projection of 45 on PrizePicks, and there's a little bit of a wiggle room here for De'Aaron Fox to potentially exceed and go over 45. So if I'm leaning one way or the other, over or under, I'm probably taking the over here, as De'Aaron Fox has been playing better basketball in his last 2, going over 45 in back-to-back games. So this spot looks like a good one to take De'Aaron Fox over, even though they've put his projection up from 40 all the way up to 45 today. Let's continue on here and move down the line. Gordon Hayward, he's projected for 36 on RotoGrinders, 37 over on PrizePicks, so they're pretty much in line with one another. I don't consider this to be a situation where we have much of an edge, but let's look at his recent game logs just real quick. I won't go into too much depth here on Hayward. In his last 5 games, he's went under today's projection of 37. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 unders, 1 over. So, given the fact that he's projected to go slightly under 37 on Roto Grinders, the other situation here working against him is that the Kings have done a pretty good job against versatile forwards. I think the under would probably be the way I would lean on Gordon Hayward. Anybody else standing out? Buddy's at 30 on PrizePicks. He's at 30 over on Roto Grinders, and the DVA puts him at 30 as well. So pretty safe to say you can expect Buddy Hield to be right around 30 fantasy points tonight. Probably a situation best avoided there, as I don't see much of an advantage for us here. Who else we got? Rashaan Holmes projected for 34 on PrizePicks, 31.94 over on Roto Grinders. That'd put him slightly under. The DVA is not in his favor, so maybe under is the way you go on Holmes. Nothing else really jumping out at me. Harrison Barnes, 32 on PrizePicks, 29.95 over on Roto Grinders. Not a good DVA situation for him, so maybe the under is the way to go on Harrison Barnes. Bagley, 30 on PrizePicks, 28.5 over on Roto Grinders. Again, another situation for versatile forwards where the Hornets have done a pretty good job limiting them to just 23. And last but not least, Lamelo Ball hiding out down here. Lamelo was a guy that I took the over on the other night. Man, he came up just short. So let's talk Lamelo real quick. They call him a distributor point guard. I call him more of a combo guard, which puts him in the same category as the guys we've already mentioned, Malik Monk, Terry Rozier. So a plus DVA situation for him. Now, 40's been a number that's kind of been tough for him lately. In his last 5, he's only hit 40 or more fantasy points 2 times. Now, he's come really close in back-to-back games, 39.8 and 39.4. But the facts are the facts. He's got 3 unders versus 2 overs in his last 5 games. So tough to trust LaMelo Ball here, as he hasn't really shown off a fantastic ceiling lately. 50 probably being his big standout game. There's a 59. So, not really feeling it. Terry Rozier, Malik Monk, probably a little bit more confident in those guys, especially Malik Monk at just 21 with his recent game logs. I think that makes a lot of sense taking the over. But that's going to do it for today's video. What do you guys think? Is there anybody that I mentioned in the video that you're absolutely loving, that you're absolutely hating, over, under, and why? Drop a comment down in the comment section below. Appreciate all your support, guys. This is CJ for Out of Bounds DFS. Play light tonight. NBA is super volatile. All these guys want to get to All-Star break, so be careful, be mindful with your money, be good stewards of your funds, okay? And we'll catch you in the next one, guys. Until then, peace.